Hi everyone, I'm Bob Abbey, Adult Services Librarian for the City of Forest Grove. I want to welcome you to another segment of our summer-long Festival of Forgotten Authors. This week, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to a mid-20th century writer who helped move the crime novel in new and more innovative directions, and who challenged the conventions of mystery and suspense fiction by providing readers with stories featuring complex, three-dimensional, well-rounded characters, and by tapping into previously unexplored emotional and psychological states. Coming up, this week's forgotten author, Dorothy B Hughes. Born Dorothy Belle Flanagan in Kansas City, Missouri in 1904, Dorothy Hughes, like many of the authors I've profiled so far, expressed an early desire to write. She graduated from the University of Missouri with a journalism degree in 1925, and she worked at the Kansas City Journal before moving to New York to pursue a writing career. She also took graduate courses at Columbia University while writing for newspapers in New York City. After traveling to Santa Fe, New Mexico to visit her pregnant sister, Dorothy decided to stay in the Southwest, transferring her credits from Columbia to the University of New Mexico, where she worked toward a master's in English. In addition to teaching basic English language skills classes, Dorothy supported herself by taking jobs with the local newspaper in Albuquerque. In 1930, she met Levi Hughes, and the pair wed 2 years later. Even during her marriage, Hughes began exploring various paths to a literary career. Her first book, Dark Certainty, was a collection of poems that won the Yale Younger Poets Award in 1931. She followed this up with Pueblo on the Mesa, a history of the University of New Mexico, which came out in 1939. Hughes also wanted to write fiction. After trying and failing to complete a mystery, she decided to take a different approach and focus instead on novels of character that also included crime, suspense, and tension. Character became an important component in the book reviews she began writing around the same time, and she favored novels with strong protagonists who developed over the course of the story. With the release of her first novel, The So Blue Marble, in 1940, Hughes embarked on a career spanning almost 25 years. Now, the story of this initial foray into genre fiction involves a tiny blue marble that contains the secrets to a lost civilization. But the focus is on the people who produced and want the marble, which is believed to capture the energy of the sun and the forces of gravity, thereby giving whoever possesses it total domination over the earth. The stone also points the way to a map that contains the location of a secret cache wherein are stored the riches of the world, rubies as big as the moon, cut diamonds and emeralds, moonstones, pearls like pebbles on the ground, gold, of course, mercury, platinum. The novel's main character is Griselda Satterley, a 24-year-old divorced movie actress and fashion designer visiting New York City. While walking home one evening after a night at the theater, she's accosted by a pair of identical twins who take her by each arm and escort her back to the apartment she's borrowing from her ex-husband for a nightcap and the blue marble they claim belongs to them. Hughes describes the ensuing encounter and Griselda's realization that these two are more than they first appear in clear, concise language that really cuts to the chase. The So Blue Marble doesn't skimp on the body count, but I think the most impressive thing about it is the way Hughes builds the character of Griselda, a woman who could easily end up the victim in the hands of a lesser writer, but whose intelligence, resourcefulness, and sheer luck set her apart from other female protagonists of the time. Hughes followed The So Blue Marble up with The Bamboo Blonde, but it was her next book, The Fallen Sparrow in 1942, that cemented her fame when Hollywood turned it into a movie the following year, starring John Garfield and Maureen O'Hara. The novel deals with Kit McKittrick, a Spanish Civil War veteran who endured 2 years of torture as a prisoner of war and who returns to the United States to investigate the murder of a friend who arranged his escape from his captors. The first half of the book sets up, but doesn't really resolve, the question of Kit's sanity, and the reader gradually begins to wonder whether the years of confinement have taken their toll on Kit, who comes across as increasingly erratic, unstable, and paranoid. Hughes ramps up the tension throughout the novel before introducing a twist that brings the story to a satisfying close. Hughes's best-known book, In a Lonely Place, published in 1947, was made into a film in 1950, starring Humphrey Bogart and Gloria Graham, and directed by Nicholas Ray. And this eventually went on to become a film noir classic. The protagonist of the story is Dix Steele, a writer who uses the profession to gain access to polite society. Dix is handsome and charming, but he's also devious and exhibits an uncontrollable rage. Like many of Hughes's male characters, Dix is isolated, alienated, and he resides on the fringes of every place he occupies. He harbors a host of secrets and lies that put him at odds with those around him. In many ways, Dix represents the dark side of post-war American life that few acknowledged existed. And like so many of Hughes's male characters, Dix is also a veteran, home from the front, someone having a hard time adjusting to life in peacetime. Hughes writes of him, "The war years were the first happy years he'd ever known. You didn't have to kowtow to the stinking rich. You were all equal in pay. And before long, you were the rich guy. Because you didn't give a damn and you were the best damn pilot in the company with promotions coming fast. You wore swell-tailored uniforms, high polish on your shoes. That life was so real that there wasn't any other life. And when the war was over, there was no realization of another life." The plot of In a Lonely Place centers on Dix's move to Los Angeles after the war and his attempts at starting a career as a writer. He decides to look up his old friend, Brub Nikolai, who's now a policeman working on a serial killer case involving a charming stranger who strangles young women. It quickly becomes apparent that Dix is the killer and that he gets a thrill from reading the newspaper coverage of the grisly murders. He stalks his prey at night, and he meets women as part of a very carefully planned strategy. With the exception of the time he spends with his friend Brub, Brub's wife Sylvia, and his sometime girlfriend Laurel, Dix's only interactions with the outside world are his nightly killing sprees. With Sylvia and Laurel, Hughes created two highly intelligent female characters who ultimately proved to be Dix's downfall. Sylvia realizes that there's something not quite right with this guy right away. Laurel takes a little longer to convince, but she eventually comes around to share Sylvia's concerns. The pair work together to set a trap for Dix that leads to his capture by police, and in the process, they subvert the traditional gender roles one ordinarily finds in crime fiction. I'd like to conclude my introduction to Dorothy B Hughes with a brief mention of her last book, The Expendable Man, which appeared in 1963 after an 11-year hiatus from writing novels. During that gap, Hughes continued to review mysteries for several papers around the country and pen short stories for Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine and Cosmopolitan. Many of her short works of fiction deal with issues of race and social justice, a theme she explored in varying degrees throughout her career. The Expendable Man takes that topic into more contemporary territory. Dr. Hugh Dinsmore, a UCLA medical intern, is driving his parents' Cadillac from Los Angeles to Phoenix to attend a wedding, and along the way he picks up a penniless and possibly underaged hitchhiker. Each time he tries to send her home, she ends up crossing his path again. She even cashes in on a bus ticket to LA that he bought her in order to continue on to Phoenix. And when the girl is found murdered, Dinsmore becomes a suspect. During the police interrogation, the reader learns something about Dinsmore that completely changes everything we thought we knew about the events up to that point. Now, I'll leave it to you to find out what that plot twist is on your own. Hughes won her second Edgar in 1964 for The Expendable Man. Her first came in 1951 for Outstanding Mystery Criticism. And shortly afterwards, she decided to retire from writing novels to devote more time to family obligations. In 1978, she wrote a biography of Earl Stanley Gardner, the creator of Perry Mason, and received the Mystery Writers of America's Grand Master Award for contributions to the genre. Now, this biography of Gardner turned out to be her final book. She gave up reviewing mysteries altogether in 1979, and she died in Ashland, Oregon in May 1993 from complications following a stroke. She was 88. Over the course of a career that spanned 2.5 decades, Dorothy B Hughes published a total of 14 crime novels, 2 nonfiction books, a handful of short stories, and countless reviews and works of criticism. Although she was highly regarded during her lifetime, much of her output was, until recently, unavailable. Thanks to new editions from the New York Review of Books, Feminist Press, Penzler Publishers' American Mystery Classics, and Wildside Press, readers can now experience one of the 20th century's greatest suspense writers, an author who redefined a genre that had been largely male-dominated in the United States. Hughes offers us interesting and fully developed characters, many of whom are women, who must navigate environments that put their mental, physical, and emotional resources to the test. I hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to the life and career of Dorothy B Hughes, and that you'll check out one of the books I've highlighted in this video, especially if you're a fan of writers like Paula Hawkins, Lisa Gardner, or Gillian Flynn. And I'd love to know what you think of her works, so leave me a comment. And be sure to click the red subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay up to date on all of the great content we're sharing with you here on YouTube. So until next week and the last installment of our Festival of Forgotten Authors, I'm Bob Abbey. Keep reading.